Sometimes the loudest cry is the one no one understands. The glass didn't shatter loudly this time, but the silence that followed felt heavier than anything money could fix as Noah Carter stood in the center of the penthouse, small fists clenched, breathing uneven, his eyes darting across a room full of adults who had already given up on him while the 20th nanny quietly gathered her things near the door, her voice trembling as she apologized to a man who didn't even look at her anymore. William Carter remained still by the window, his reflection cold against the Manhattan skyline, a billionaire who could close deals in minutes yet hadn't heard his own son speak in over 2 years. The nanny left, the door clicked softly, and Noah flinched at the sound, pressing his hands over his ears as if the world itself was too loud, too sharp, too much. William exhaled slowly, adjusting the cuff of his Swiss watch out of habit, control in every detail except the one that mattered. "I'll find another," his assistant whispered from behind him, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore, because 20 had already come and gone, each one more qualified than the last. Degrees, certifications, references, none of it reached the boy standing 10 feet away like a stranger in his own home. Noah suddenly knocked a spoon off the table, the metal clinking against marble, and his body stiffened instantly as if the sound had hurt him. His breathing quickened, panic rising in a way no one in the room knew how to stop. "Noah," William said. Carefully, controlled, practiced, but the boy didn't respond. He never did. The room tightened, the air felt thinner, and then something small happened, so small no one noticed at first. The sound of footsteps, quiet, measured, unhurried. Emily Brooks stepped in with a tray, just a waitress, just someone bringing lunch, but her eyes moved differently, not scanning the room, not impressed by the marble or the skyline, only focused on the boy. She paused, just long enough to see what everyone else had missed, the way Noah reacted not to people, but to sound, to movement, to pressure. She set the tray down gently, slower than necessary, the spoon touching the table without a single sharp note, and Noah's shoulders dropped, just slightly, almost invisible, but she saw it, and without asking, without announcing herself, she lowered herself into the chair across from him, not speaking, not reaching, just sitting, calm, steady, present. And for the first time that day, Noah didn't scream. William turned, finally noticing her, confusion crossing his face, because no one had ever done nothing like this before, and somehow, it was the only thing that worked. No one told her to stay, but Emily did not move, her hands resting loosely in her lap, her breathing slow and even, matching the rhythm she had quietly chosen for the room. While Noah sat across from her, his small chest rising too fast, his fingers twitching against the edge of the table as if the world around him was still too loud, too sharp, too unpredictable. She did not reach for him, did not call his name. She simply adjusted the position of the spoon again, sliding it half an inch away from the edge, careful, controlled, deliberate, and Noah noticed. His eyes flickered to the movement, then back to her face. Searching, measuring, trying to understand what she would do next. William watched from across the room, his brow tightening, because this was not in any protocol. There were no instructions, no techniques he recognized, just a waitress sitting in silence as if she belonged there. "What is she doing?" his assistant whispered, but he did not answer because something in him hesitated, something told him not to interrupt. Noah shifted in his chair, the tension in his shoulders still there but no longer escalating. He tapped the table once, a soft, uneven sound, and Emily responded, not with words, but by tapping her own fingers gently against the wood, matching his rhythm, not correcting it, not leading it, just following. And the boy paused, his head tilting slightly, confusion replacing panic. He tapped again, a little louder this time, and she followed again, steady, calm, consistent, like an echo that did not overwhelm him, like a mirror that did not judge him. The room held its breath as the pattern continued, tap, pause, tap, and for the first time, Noah leaned forward, just a fraction, closing the distance between them by less than an inch, but it was enough to make William straighten where he stood, his heart tightening in a way he had not felt in years. Emily lowered her gaze slightly, softening her presence, reducing the pressure of eye contact, and Noah's breathing slowed, not completely, but enough to notice, enough to matter. She then reached for the glass of water, not handing it to him, not offering it directly, just placing it within reach, and leaving it there, an option, not a demand. Noah looked at it, then at her, then slowly, carefully he reached out, his fingers brushing the glass as if testing whether it would hurt him too. When nothing happened, he wrapped his hand around it, his grip uncertain but intentional, and took a small sip. The assistant covered her mouth in disbelief, while William said nothing because he could not, because in a room where experts had failed, where money had solved everything except this, A quiet waitress had just done something no one else had managed. She had not controlled his son, she had not corrected him, she had simply understood him. And that realization landed heavier than any silence that came before. William did not realize he had stopped breathing until Noah moved again, this time not in panic but with hesitation, as if every motion had to be negotiated with the world around him. The glass remained in his hand, small fingers wrapped unevenly around it, and when he placed it back down, the sound was soft, controlled, intentional. Emily noticed immediately, not with surprise, but with quiet acknowledgement. A slight nod that said nothing and yet confirmed everything, and Noah saw it, his eyes narrowing just slightly as if recognizing a pattern, a response that made sense, something predictable in a world that had never been predictable for him. Across the room, William stepped forward without thinking, one single step, the polished floor catching the light beneath his shoes, and that was enough. Noah's shoulders tensed again, the fragile calm beginning to crack. Emily raised her hand just slightly, not toward Noah, but toward William, a silent signal. Stop. Not commanding, not disrespectful, just clear and for the first time in years, William Carter, a man who controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations, froze at the gesture of a waitress, his jaw tightened, confusion flickering into something else, something unfamiliar. Restraint. He stepped back, just one step, but it changed everything. The tension in Noah's body softened again, not completely, but enough to hold the moment together. Emily shifted her posture slightly, turning her body at a small angle instead of facing Noah directly, reducing the intensity, giving him space without leaving him alone. Her hand rested lightly on the table, fingers open, not reaching, just present. Noah watched that hand for a long second, then slowly, carefully, he mirrored her, placing his own hand on the table, not touching hers, but close enough that the distance no longer felt impossible. The assistant let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, her eyes wide as she looked at William, who said nothing because there was nothing to say, no strategy he could apply, no instruction he could give, only the realization that control had never been the answer. Emily then did something even smaller, something almost invisible. She tapped the table once, softer than before, slower, giving Noah time, and he followed, not perfectly, not consistently, but he followed, and in that uneven rhythm, something began to form. Not communication as the world defined it, but connection. Real, fragile, undeniable. Minutes passed like this, quiet, measured, uninterrupted, until Noah shifted again, this time leaning forward just enough that his sleeve brushed against Emily's hand. The contact was brief, accidental, but he did not pull away immediately, and Emily did not react, did not make it bigger than it was, she simply allowed it to exist, and that was when William felt it, not a breakthrough, not yet, but the beginning of one. The first crack in a wall that had held for 2 long years, and he realized, standing there in a room filled with silence, that this woman had not changed his son in minutes. She had changed the way the room treated him, and somehow that was what his son had been waiting for all along. Time seemed to slow inside the penthouse, not because anything dramatic had happened, but because for the first time, nothing was being forced. Noah remained seated, his hand still resting on the table, his breathing uneven but no longer spiraling, and Emily stayed exactly where she was, grounded, patient, allowing the silence to do its work. She did not rush the moment, did not try to turn it into something more than it was, because she understood that for Noah, this was already everything. Across the room, William shifted his weight slightly, careful now, aware that even the smallest movement could undo what had been built, his eyes never leaving his son, searching for any sign that this fragile connection might break. But instead, something else happened. Noah glanced up again, not just at Emily this time, but past her, toward the space behind her, toward the room, toward his father. The movement was brief, almost instinctive, but it was the first time he had acknowledged anyone else in that space without retreating. Emily noticed it. Of course she did, but she did not turn, did not draw attention to it. She simply adjusted her breathing again, slow, steady, creating a rhythm that Noah could follow if he chose to, and after a moment he did, his chest rising and falling just a little more evenly, matching her pace without realizing it. The assistant stepped closer to William, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, should we call someone, a specialist maybe?" But William shook his head, almost imperceptibly, because for the first time, bringing in another expert felt like the wrong move. Like noise in a moment that needed quiet, Emily then reached into her apron, not quickly, not suddenly, and pulled out something small, a folded napkin. She placed it on the table and slowly smoothed it flat, her movements deliberate, predictable, each one easy to follow. Noah's eyes tracked the motion, his focus narrowing, the rest of the room fading into the background. She picked up the spoon again, but this time, she did not tap it. She simply placed it on the napkin, aligning it carefully along the edge. Then she looked at Noah, not directly into his eyes, but close enough to invite, not demand, and after a long pause he moved, his hand hovering uncertainly before reaching toward the napkin, his fingers brushing the fabric, then adjusting it, just slightly mirroring what she had done. The movement was small, almost nothing, but to William, it felt like watching the first word of a language he had never been able to understand. Emily gave the faintest nod, a quiet recognition, and Noah's lips parted, not to speak, not yet, but as if something inside him was beginning to form, something that had been waiting for the right kind of silence, the right kind of presence, and William felt it then, not as a victory, but as a realization that everything he had tried before had been about changing his son, when what his son needed was someone who would change the way the world reached him. And as Emily remained there, steady and unseen in her quiet strength, he understood that this was not luck, not coincidence, but something far more rare, someone who knew how to listen without a single word. The room did not celebrate, it did not move, it simply held the moment as if even the air understood it was not allowed to rush what was happening. Noah's fingers remained on the napkin, adjusting its edge again with careful precision, not because anyone asked him to, but because for the first time something made sense, something responded the way he expected it to. Emily watched without reacting, her posture unchanged, her presence steady like a quiet anchor in a space that had always been too unpredictable for him. William slowly lowered himself into a chair several feet away, the distance intentional now, no longer trying to close the gap with authority, but respecting it as something that had to be earned. His eyes fixed on his son, searching not for control, but for understanding. Emily then shifted slightly, reaching for another item on the tray, a folded paper napkin. She placed it beside the first one, leaving space between them, clear, simple, defined, and then she waited, not looking at Noah directly, but remaining within his awareness, giving him room to decide. Seconds passed, long enough for doubt to return to the edges of the room, until Noah moved again. Slower this time, his hand hovering over the second napkin before pressing it down, aligning it imperfectly beside the first, his movement uncertain but intentional. Emily gave the smallest nod again, reinforcing without overwhelming, and Noah's breathing steadied further, the tension in his shoulders easing as if each predictable response was removing a layer of weight he had been carrying alone. Across the room, the assistant wiped a tear from her eye without realizing it, while William leaned forward slightly, his expression no longer guarded but open, vulnerable in a way he had not allowed himself to be in years. Emily then did something different, something new. She tapped the edge of the napkin twice, slow, soft, leaving space between each sound, and then she stopped, giving Noah time, and after a pause that felt longer than it was, he followed, not perfectly, not in the same rhythm, but close enough. And when he finished, he looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her, and this time, he did not look away immediately. Emily met that moment gently, not holding his gaze too tightly, just enough to acknowledge it, and then she softened it again, reducing the intensity before it could overwhelm him. And that was when it happened, subtle, almost fragile. Noah's lips parted again, his breath catching slightly as if something inside him was pushing forward, something that had been buried under years of noise and confusion. His voice did not come out fully, not yet, but there was a sound, quiet, unfinished, and William felt it hit him harder than anything he had experienced in any boardroom or negotiation, because this was not about success or failure. This was about his son finding a way back to the world, one small moment at a time. And as Emily remained calm, grounded, and patient, he realized that she was not trying to fix Noah. She was giving him something far more powerful, the space to be understood, and for the first time that was enough. The sound did not fully form, but it was there, fragile and unfinished, like a word that had been waiting too long to exist, and Emily did not react to it the way others might have. She did not lean forward, did not ask him to repeat it, did not turn it into a moment that carried pressure. Instead, she stayed exactly as she was, grounded, steady, allowing the sound to pass through the space without being chased, and that made all the difference. Noah's body did not tense, his breathing did not spike, he simply remained there, his fingers still resting on the edge of the napkin, his eyes flickering between her hands and her face as if trying to decide what came next. Across the room, William felt something tighten in his chest, not fear, not frustration, but something unfamiliar, patience. He had spent years trying to pull words out of silence, and now he was watching someone Protect that silence as if it mattered more than the words themselves. Emily shifted slightly, just enough to change the angle of the table between them, reducing the distance by an inch, nothing more, and then she placed her hand flat on the surface again, open, relaxed, not reaching, simply present. Noah watched the movement carefully, his gaze following every detail, and after a moment, he mirrored her again, his smaller hand pressing against the table in a similar position, the gap between them still there, but no longer impossible. Emily tapped once, soft, slow, leaving space, and Noah followed, his timing uneven but intentional. Then she waited longer this time, stretching the silence just enough to see if he would continue on his own, and he did, tapping again without her, a second action that belonged to him, not to her guidance, and Emily gave a slight nod, reinforcing the choice without overwhelming it. The assistant let out a quiet breath, barely audible, while William leaned forward again, his eyes fixed on the smallest details, because he understood now that this was where everything was happening, not in big gestures, not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in these quiet, almost invisible shifts. Emily then did something new, something that changed the rhythm just enough. She slid her hand a little closer, not touching, just reducing the space again, and paused, giving Noah time to process. His fingers twitched slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the distance, and then slowly, carefully, he moved his hand as well, closing the gap until only a fraction of an inch remained between them, and then he stopped, holding that position as if testing whether it was safe, whether it would stay the same. Emily did not move, did not rush, she simply stayed, and after a long second, Noah's finger shifted forward, just enough to brush against hers. The contact was light, uncertain, but real, and he did not pull away immediately. William felt his breath catch as he watched, his mind racing to hold on to the moment without breaking it, because this was something no report, no specialist, no amount of money had been able to create, and Emily remained calm, unchanged, as if this small touch was not a miracle but a natural result of being understood. And in that quiet connection, William realized that for the first time in 2 years, his son was not being asked to come back to the world. He was being met exactly where he was. The contact lasted less than a second, but it changed everything. Noah did not pull away immediately this time, his finger resting lightly against Emily's as if testing whether the moment would break, whether the world would suddenly become too loud again. But it did not. Nothing rushed in, nothing demanded more from him, and that was what allowed him to stay. Emily kept her hand exactly where it was, not pressing forward, not retreating, simply present, her breathing steady, her posture unchanged, offering him something he had not been given in a long time, consistency. Across the room, William felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding what he was witnessing, because this was not a technique, not a performance, this was something deeper, something that could not be bought or forced. It had to be given slowly, patiently, without expectation. Noah's eyes lifted again, this time more directly, landing on Emily's face for a fraction longer than before, and when she noticed, she softened her gaze just enough, not holding him there, not trapping him in eye contact, but letting him know it was safe to look and safe to look away, and he did both, glancing away, then back again, as if learning the rhythm of connection in real time. Emily then moved her hand slightly, just a small shift backward, creating space again, and Noah reacted instantly, his finger following the movement by a fraction, not enough to fully close the gap, but enough to show that he was aware, that he did not want the connection to disappear completely. And that was when William exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath again, because for the first time, his son was not retreating from the world, he was reaching for it, even if only by an inch. Emily reached for the napkin once more, folding one corner gently, then another, her movements calm and predictable, giving Noah something to follow, and after a moment he did, his hands mimicking the folds imperfectly, the edges uneven, but the intention clear. She did not correct him, did not guide his hands, she simply mirrored the result, showing him that it was enough, that he was enough. The assistant turned slightly, wiping her eyes again while William remained still, his mind replaying every moment that had led here, every decision he had made, every time he had tried to fix what he did not understand. And now, watching Emily, he saw the difference. She was not trying to lead Noah out of his world, she was stepping into it with him, one quiet action at a time. Noah paused again, his fingers resting on the folded napkin, his breathing steady now, not perfect but calmer, and then slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand and placed it flat on the table once more, this time closer than before, closer than it had ever been, and he did not hesitate as long his finger moving forward again, touching hers, not by accident this time but by choice, and Emily did not react with surprise, she simply stayed, allowing the moment to exist without turning it into something overwhelming, and William felt something shift deep inside him, a realization that settled heavier than anything else, that his son had not been unreachable, he had simply been unheard, and the quiet woman sitting across from him had known that from the very first second. The second touch did not break, it held, steady and deliberate, Noah's finger resting against Emily's with a quiet certainty that had not existed even seconds before, and this time, he did not pull away at all, he stayed, his breathing slow, his shoulders no longer tight, as if something inside him had finally found a place to rest. Emily remained exactly as she was, her hand relaxed, her presence unchanged, offering no sudden reaction that might disrupt the fragile balance they had built together. Across the room, William felt his throat tighten, his eyes fixed on the smallest detail, the space between two hands that no longer felt like distance but connection, real and undeniable. He took a step forward before he could stop himself, instinct pulling him closer, but this time, Noah did not flinch immediately. He hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the movement, and the tension rose again, subtle but real. Emily noticed it instantly, her hand shifting just slightly, grounding the moment again without breaking it, her breathing slowing just enough to guide the rhythm back into place. And Noah followed, not perfectly but enough, the tension easing instead of escalating. William stopped where he was, understanding now that even his presence carried weight, that every movement mattered, every sound mattered. Emily then did something new, something almost invisible. She turned her hand slightly, not to hold Noah's, not to grasp, but to change the angle of contact, giving him control over whether the touch would remain or end, and Noah responded, his finger adjusting naturally, maintaining the connection on his own terms. And that was when it happened, quiet, fragile but unmistakable. His lips parted again, his breath catching for a second, and this time the sound came clearer, not loud, not strong but shaped, intentional. Stay. The word was barely above a whisper, but it filled the entire room. The assistant gasped softly, covering her mouth, while William froze completely, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Because it was not just a word, it was a bridge, a signal, a choice. Noah's eyes remained on Emily, not asking, not demanding, simply expressing something he had not been able to before. And Emily did not react with surprise, she did not turn it into a celebration, she simply nodded once, calm, steady, accepting the word as if it had always belonged there. I am here, she said softly, her voice low, even, not overwhelming. The moment, just meeting it, and Noah's shoulders dropped further, the tension leaving his body in a way that felt final, not temporary. Across the room, William lowered himself into the nearest chair, his hand pressing lightly against his chest as if trying to hold something together inside him, because in a single quiet moment, everything he believed about control, about solutions, about fixing what was broken, had been rewritten, and the woman he had not even noticed an hour ago was now the only person his son had asked to stay. The word lingered in the air long after it was spoken, soft and fragile, yet heavier than anything that had filled that room in years. Noah did not look away after saying it. His eyes remained fixed on Emily as if the word had taken something out of him and placed it between them, something real, something he was not ready to lose, and Emily understood that without needing to be told. Her posture remained steady, her hand still close to his, her presence unchanged, because this moment was not something to celebrate, it was something to protect. Across the room, William sat motionless, his mind replaying the single word again and again. Stay, not a sentence, not a demand, but a choice, a request, a connection. And for the first time in 2 years it had not been forced, it had not been pulled out of silence, it had come freely, and that was what made it matter. The assistant shifted slightly beside him, her voice barely a whisper. He spoke. But William did not respond, because speaking was not the point, understanding was, and he was only now beginning to grasp what that truly meant. Noah's fingers moved again, this time not just touching Emily's, but resting beside hers with quiet intention. The distance between them no longer something he feared, but something he controlled. Emily adjusted her hand just slightly, not closing the gap, not removing it, simply maintaining the balance he had created, and Noah's breathing remained steady, no sharp spikes, no sudden retreat, just a calm that felt unfamiliar but safe. She then reached for the folded napkin again, not to change it, not to correct it, but to slide it gently a few inches closer to him, a small shift, a quiet invitation, and Noah followed, his hand moving with it, not hesitating. This time not pulling back, and when he reached the new position he paused, his fingers pressing lightly against the table as if confirming that the world had not changed, that the pattern was still the same. Emily gave the smallest nod again, reinforcing the moment without overwhelming it, and Noah's shoulders dropped just a little more, the tension leaving him layer by layer. Across the room, William leaned forward. His hands clasped together now, no longer trying to control anything, just watching, learning, understanding that every instinct he had relied on before had been wrong, that what his son needed was not direction, not correction, but someone who would meet him where he was and stay there, without rushing, without demanding more. Emily's voice came again, soft, even, "I am here." Not louder than before, not different, just consistent, and Noah responded in the only way he knew how, by staying, by not retreating, by allowing the moment to continue without breaking it. And William felt something shift deep inside him, something that could not be undone, because for the first time he was not watching someone try to fix his son, he was watching someone understand him, and that understanding was what had opened a door no one else had even seen. The room did not move on from the moment, it expanded around it, stretching time in a way that made every second feel intentional. Noah remained where he was, his hand still near Emily's, his body no longer braced for impact, and Emily stayed with him in that same quiet rhythm, not asking for more, not turning the moment into something larger than it needed to be, because she understood that this was already enough. Across the room, William slowly stood again, but this time his movement was different, measured, aware. He did not step forward immediately, he waited, watching Noah's reaction, and when there was none, no flinch, no tightening of the shoulders, he took one careful step, then another, each one slower than the last, until he stopped several feet away, close enough to see his son clearly, but far enough not to disturb the space that had been built. Noah's eyes shifted toward him briefly, not with fear, but with awareness, and then back to Emily, as if anchoring himself before allowing anything else in. Emily noticed, of course she did, and she adjusted her presence just slightly, turning her body a fraction more open, allowing Noah to feel both directions at once without pressure. The connection did not break, it widened. William lowered himself to one knee, his posture unfamiliar, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "Noah," he said, not as a command, not as an expectation, but as an offering, and Noah heard it, not fully, not in the way most people would understand, but enough. His fingers pressed lightly against the table again, grounding himself, and Emily remained steady, her hand still, her breathing unchanged, reinforcing the rhythm that had brought him this far. William did not move closer, did not reach out. He stayed where he was, allowing the distance to exist without trying to erase it. And that was when something shifted again, small, almost invisible. Noah glanced at his father a second time, longer this time, his eyes lingering for a fraction of a second more than before. And then, slowly, carefully, he turned his head just enough to face him, not fully, not completely, but enough to acknowledge his presence. The assistant covered her mouth again, her eyes filling with tears, while William felt his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with fear. This was something else, something deeper, something earned. Emily did not speak, she did not guide, she simply stayed, allowing Noah to choose each step without pressure. And after a long pause, Noah's hand moved again, not toward Emily this time, but slightly outward, a small shift, a subtle opening, as if making room for something new, something unfamiliar, and William saw it, understood it in a way he had never understood anything before. And he did not rush, did not close the distance all at once. He moved slowly, carefully, lowering his hand to the edge of the table, not touching, not reaching, just placing it there, within Noah's view, within his control. And then he waited, the room silent, the moment suspended, and for the first time William Carter was not trying to lead. He was learning how to follow. William's hand remained on the edge of the table, still open, waiting without expectation, and for the first time in years, he did not try to close the distance himself, he let it exist, let his son decide what would happen next. Noah's eyes moved slowly between the two hands in front of him, one familiar, steady, safe, the other new, uncertain, but no longer overwhelming. His breathing stayed even, guided by the quiet rhythm Emily had created, and she remained exactly where she was, not stepping back, not stepping in, allowing the space between father and son to form without interference, because this part did not belong to her, it belonged to them. Noah's fingers twitched slightly, a small movement that might have gone unnoticed before, but now carried weight, intention, possibility. He lifted his hand just a fraction off the table, hesitating midair as if measuring the moment, Testing whether it would hold, William did not move, not even an inch, his voice silent, his presence softer than it had ever been. And that stillness gave Noah something rare, control, the choice to move forward without being pulled. Slowly, carefully, Noah's hand shifted, not directly toward William, but outward, tracing a small path across the surface of the table. His fingers brushing the edge of the napkin before continuing, each inch deliberate, each second stretched, the room holding its breath again. Emily's eyes followed the movement without reacting, her posture unchanged, her presence still an anchor, but no longer the center because the moment had shifted and she allowed it to without claiming it. Noah paused again, his hand hovering just short of William's, the distance between them smaller than it had ever been, and for a second doubt flickered across his face, his fingers tightening slightly as if ready to pull back, and that was when William did something he had never done before. He lowered his gaze just a little, softening it, removing the weight of expectation, offering presence without pressure, and Noah noticed, his shoulders easing just enough. His hand moving forward again, closing the final gap until his fingertips brushed lightly against his father's. The contact was brief at first, uncertain but real, and William did not react, did not reach, did not close his hand around it. He simply allowed it to exist, exactly as Emily had done before, and that was what made it hold. Noah's fingers remained there a moment longer, resting against his father's, not fully connected, but no longer separate, and in that quiet contact, something passed between them. Not words, not understanding in the way people often expect, but something deeper, recognition, presence, the beginning of something that had been missing for far too long. Across the room, the assistant turned away slightly, overwhelmed by the stillness of it all, while Emily remained where she was, her hands resting quietly in her lap now, no longer needed in the same way, her role shifting without announcement, without recognition, because she had never been trying to lead, only to make space. And as William looked at his son, his hand still resting gently against Noah's, he realized that for the first time, he was not trying to bring his son back to him. He was finally meeting him where he had always been. The contact did not break this time. It settled, quiet and steady, Noah's fingers resting against his father's as if the moment had finally found a place to stay, and William did not move, not even when the weight of it pressed against him. He simply allowed it. His hand open, his presence calm, because he understood now that anything more would be too much, anything less would be lost. Noah's breathing remained even, his shoulders relaxed in a way that felt unfamiliar but real, and for a long second, neither of them moved, the silence stretching not as emptiness, but as something full, something complete. Across the room, Emily watched without stepping in, her role now fully shifted, no longer guiding, no longer anchoring, just witnessing, her eyes soft, her posture still, because she knew this part belonged to them alone. Noah's fingers pressed just slightly, not gripping, not holding, but acknowledging the contact, and William felt it, a small increase in pressure that carried more meaning than any words he had ever spoken. His throat tightened, but he kept his breathing steady, matching the rhythm he had learned to follow, not lead. Noah then did something even smaller, something that might have gone unnoticed before. He did not pull away when the moment stretched, he stayed, his hand still touching his father's, his body no longer preparing to retreat. And that was when William realized the difference. This was not a reaction, it was a choice, a quiet decision made without pressure, without fear. Emily shifted slightly in her chair, her movement gentle, careful not to disturb the space, and for the first time, Noah glanced toward her again, not to seek direction but as if confirming that she was still there, and she met that glance with the same calm presence, giving nothing new, nothing different, just consistency, and Noah returned his focus to his father, the connection holding, the distance no longer something that needed to be measured. William slowly turned his hand just a fraction, not to hold but to align, to meet Noah's touch without taking control of it, and the contact deepened, not stronger, not tighter, just more certain. The assistant stepped back quietly, understanding without being told that this was not a moment for words, and the room remained still, the city outside moving in silence behind glass walls, unaware that something far more important was unfolding inside. Noah's lips parted again, not to form a full sentence, not yet, but to release a soft breath, a sound that carried no fear, only presence, and William felt it again, that same shift inside him, deeper now, clearer, because he finally understood that his son had not needed to be changed, he had needed to be reached in a way that did not overwhelm him, in a way that respected who he was. And as Noah's hand remained against his, steady and real, William realized that for the first time, He was not standing outside his son's world. He was inside it, even if only by a single quiet touch. The moment did not end. It settled into something quieter, something deeper. Noah's hand still resting against his father's, no longer uncertain, no longer testing, just there, and William remained exactly where he was, not moving, not speaking, understanding now that this silence was not empty. It was full of something he had never learned to give before, presence without pressure, time without demand. Across the room, Emily slowly stood, her movement careful, almost invisible, as if she did not want to disturb what no longer needed her to hold it together. She adjusted the tray beside her, the soft clink of porcelain barely audible, and Noah did not flinch. He did not pull away. His connection remained steady, and that was when William noticed something he would never forget. His son was no longer reacting to the world. He was existing within it, calm, aware, present. Emily took a step back, then another, her role complete, not because she had finished something, but because she had created space for something else to begin. She did not look for recognition, did not wait for acknowledgement. She simply moved toward the doorway the same way she had entered, quietly, without drawing attention to herself. William's eyes followed her for a brief second, a silent understanding passing through him, something deeper than gratitude, something closer to realization, because he knew this was not luck, not coincidence. It was something she carried, something she chose to give without asking for anything in return. Noah's fingers shifted slightly again, still touching his father's, and this time William allowed his hand to respond, just a fraction, not closing, not taking control, simply meeting the touch with the same calm presence he had learned to hold. And Noah did not retreat, he stayed, his breathing even, his shoulders relaxed, his world no longer something he had to defend himself from. Outside, the city continued as it always had, distant lights moving, unaware, but inside, something had changed that would not return to what it was before. Emily reached the door, her hand resting briefly on the handle, and for a moment she paused, not turning around, not interrupting the silence she had helped create, just standing there long enough for the moment to settle fully into the room. And then she stepped out, leaving behind no instructions, no explanation, only the quiet result of what understanding can do. William looked back at his son, their hands still connected, the distance that had once felt impossible now gone, replaced by something simple, something real, and he finally understood, not through words, not through explanation, but through the silence that remained, that his son had never needed to be fixed, he had needed to be understood. And sometimes the most powerful change does not come from doing more, it comes from knowing when to do less.